Hello, I'm Scott Wipperman, the pastor here at First Presbyterian Church. And no matter who you are or where you are in your journey of faith, know that you're welcome here. We hope you enjoy today's service on this video, and we invite you to come join us for worship anytime that you would like, or join us in any of the other activities of the church. For more information about First Presbyterian Church, please visit our website at fpchelena.com or call us at 442-4775. God bless. And our New Testament reading comes from the book of Acts. It's one you've probably heard once or twice before. When the day of Pentecost came, they were all together in one place. Suddenly, a sound like the blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit enabled them. Now they were staying in Jerusalem, and God-fearing Jews from every nation were under heaven were there. When they heard this sound, a crowd came together in bewilderment, because each one heard their own language being spoken. Utterly amazed, they asked, "Aren't all these who are speaking Galileans? Then how is it that each of us hears them in our native language? Parthians, Medes, Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and parts of Libya near Cyrene, visitors from Rome, both Jews and converts to Judaism, Cretans and Arabs. We hear them declaring the wonders of God in our own tongues." Amazed and perplexed, they asked one another, "What does this mean?" Some, however, made fun of them and said, "They have had too much wine." Then Peter stood up with the 11 and raised his voice and addressed the crowd. "Fellow Jews, and all of you who live in Jerusalem, let me explain this to you. Listen carefully to what I say. These people are not drunk, as you suppose. It's only 9 o'clock in the morning. No, this is what was spoken by the prophet Joel. In the last days, God says, "I will pour out my Spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my Spirit in those days, and they will prophesy. I will show wonders in the heavens above and signs on earth below, blood and fire and billows of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and glorious days of the Lord. And everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." The word of the Lord. Well, we don't speak about the Spirit a whole lot, do we? Pentecost is one of those few days of the year where the Spirit gets center stage. Possibly it's because the Spirit is intangible. We can't measure it. We can't touch it. It's not scientifically provable. So maybe that makes us a little less comfortable talking about the Spirit. But this day we wear our red and we speak of the Spirit that fills us all. John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist tradition, spoke of his heart strangely warmed. And this was the Spirit filling his heart. It wasn't what he had for dinner. It wasn't heartburn. It's the Spirit working in with us. And we don't talk about the Spirit much, but it is something that's there all the time. Here with us, filling us, guiding us. And the Spirit isn't just something of Acts. We read about it in the Old Testament. Now, there are some pronoun problems in the Old Testament here. It says that the Lord came down in the cloud and spoke with Moses, and he took the Spirit that was on him. The he here is imprecise. Is it the God who took the Spirit and is bestowing it, or is it Moses? English would tell us that the pronoun refers to the subject of the sentence, God. But quite often pronouns also refer to the closest proper noun, which would be Moses in this case. Now, I think this might have been written slightly before English rules of grammar were laid down. Because in the rest of this sentence and the rest of this passage, we figure out that the he here is Moses. The Spirit comes on him, and he passes it on to the 70 leaders and elders of the people of Israel there in the tent and outside in the camp. He passes the Spirit on to them. In the New Testament reading, all are gathered in this house, and the Spirit comes upon all, not just the apostles, but everyone who is present in the house. The Spirit comes and rests on them. And this is what Moses said he wished would have happened back in his time. He says, I wish all would have prophesied, that all would have been filled with the Spirit. But here the Spirit comes and settles on those in the house, and they all begin to prophesy. They all begin to speak in other tongues. And here other tongues is apparently not speaking in tongues, but speaking in other languages. They all begin to speak the good news in a language that is completely foreign to them. And all the people in the crowd are amazed when they hear this. They hear this cacophony of voices coming out, but through the cacophony, each one can hear in their native language a message being relayed to them. It must have been quite a sight. It must have been something truly amazing to be there and to witness this. And it says that many were converted that day and became followers of the good news that was being relayed to them. Translating is always a little bit of trouble. And some experts in translation say that speakers like President Trump make it even a little bit more harder, because they speak in idioms of their native language, and those idioms are hard to translate. Trump has used showboat recently in some of the things he said, and they say trying to translate that is difficult. You can translate it literally, and you come up with garbage in the language that's receiving the translation. There's a phrase in Spanish. If you translate it literally into English, you get speaking out of your elbow. Makes all the sense in the world, right? And this is what happens when you try to translate these idioms directly into another language. So translators can't do that. But you could explain the idiom. You could translate it as was drawing attention to themselves, him or herself, instead of using the word showboat. But that also has a problem, doesn't it? Because now you're not being true to the speaker, because this isn't the way the speaker sounded or the way the speaker speaks. So the only real way to translate this is to try to find an idiom in the receiving language that matches the idiom in the original language. And like that, what I told you about speaking out of your elbow, that's the Spanish equivalent of our speaking out of your hat. When you're saying nonsense, you're speaking out of your elbow in Spanish. So translating is difficult. And speaking in another language that isn't our language, that maybe we know, sometimes we feel awkward about that because we're somewhat poor at the language. I know Spanish just well enough. Well, I don't even know it well enough to get in trouble. There's all kinds of stories you hear about people mistranslating things. One of my Spanish teachers said, and I might get this wrong, so I apologize to those of you who do speak Spanish, but she was at a restaurant and there was another American woman there that was obviously trying to use her Spanish and was trying to say, basically, I have a hunger and I want some milk, which is tengo hambre and quiero leche. But But she said tango hombre and quiero lecho, which translates, I have a man and want a bed. And the teacher said she was perplexed as to whether she should intercede in this confusion or just let it go for a while there. But the Spirit comes down upon these people and comes down upon us in an amazing way. When they were speaking the other language of these people, they were being very intimate with those people. They weren't forcing those other people to learn and hear in their own context, the context they were coming from as speakers. They were entering the hearer's context. And the hearers, upon hearing that in their own native language, felt a great deal of intimacy with these people that were speaking. And this is the power of the Spirit. You know, God knows how to speak human pretty well. And He does that through the Spirit. The Spirit is amazingly intimate with us. The same intimacy that is shared between the Spirit and the Father and the Son is the same intimacy that the Spirit shares with us. The Spirit knows us through and through and knows how to communicate with us, knows how to warm our hearts. And it is this intimacy that the Spirit is asking us to carry forward to others. In the movie Airplane, you might remember there's a scene where there's two passengers who only speak jive. And they're talking to a flight attendant, and the flight attendant doesn't understand a word of what they're saying. And then there's this silver-haired woman on the other side of the aisle that gets up and stands up and says, "Oh, I speak jive." And she translates what the two gentlemen were saying for them. And both the attendant and the two gentlemen were just shocked that this woman knew this, that she had the intimacy with them to understand and to work in their context. And so when we pray for the Spirit to come down upon us, are we ready for the Spirit to put others' words, others' languages in our mouths? Are we ready for us to be dunked into other cultures so that we can be intimate with those people, speak to them on their terms? One of my daughters, Amber, many years ago who doesn't know Spanish, is even worse at it than I am, and that's a really low bar kind of thing. But she was in a situation where she needed to speak and tell some Spanish-speaking people, some people who didn't know English, something. And she found that she could speak Spanish. She could explain to them what she needed to explain, more than just bathroom language and how do I get a beer. But the Spirit came upon her, just like these people. And so these are Pentecost miracles that happen. Whether it is that we're speaking another language, whether we're speaking jive, whether we're speaking millennialism, if I can get that out, that we enter into another person's context and can relate and communicate with them. The Spirit is all about relationship, about forming this intimate relationship with others and empowering us to do that. Even if we're just speaking English, but speaking it in a way that another can hear. Speaking it in a way that matches another's context. So this is what we're celebrating on this day, this miracle of Pentecost. Is the Spirit being intimate with us and leading us out to being intimate with others, to communicate this good news of Christ, that God is love, that God has conquered death, And that no matter what we've done, we are still included, we are forgiven, we're desired, we are part of the clan, we belong, we are wanted. So let us be open on this day to the Spirit filling us. Let us be open to it putting strange words that we might feel a little uncomfortable saying into our mouths, trusting that whatever comes out, the Spirit will somehow take and make it something that the other people can hear in their context. Let us go out amongst those that we don't normally visit with and share the good news of Christ, of this God of love, of this embrace that we have through God, through Christ, and through the Spirit that is always with us, warming our heart. And when you feel that, just remember, it's not heartburn. It's something much more powerful than that.